A very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13. I'm Ritwika Gupta. Tonight on the show, I'm in conversation with Ambarish Kenghe, Group CEO, Angel One, who speaks to me about India's fintech evolution and investor behavior. Listen in. Ambarish, welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So let's start with the big picture. Tell us, Ambarish, where do you see India on the world stage? Where do you think we are positioned, especially in times of global disruption? What do you think our strategic priorities need to be?
Look, I'm not going to tell you any secret when I say, look, India has arrived. There's a long way to go, but it's arrived because we are the fourth largest economy in the world. And even with the fourth largest economy, we are the fastest growing largest economy that you can think of, which is crazy. But what is going to blow your mind, Ritwika, is that let's look at, when you look at economies, you look at a very long period of time, right? So let's look at 2025 to 2050, sure. Okay? That 25-year period. The world economy, the world GDP in that time will grow by about 70 to 75 trillion dollars. When you take $1 trillion in today's dollars, right? In that time, Indian economy will grow quite a bit, and it will contribute 25% at least of that growth. So out of the $75 trillion that get added, India will add more than 1/4 of that growth. One country adding that kind of growth is incredible. So that just tells you the importance of India on the world stage and why everybody's looking at India and saying, look, this is an incredible market that we have today. That said, there is a lot of headroom. I don't think, we have a long way to go. So we are a $4.2 trillion economy.
Yeah.
China is at $19 trillion. US is at $30 trillion. So there is a long way to go, and it'll be a while before we cover that distance. But there are ways we can cover that distance. Right? So you talked about priorities, right? What kinds of things can we do? Number one, we have to focus on the next gen infrastructure. We've, of course, we have this habit of leapfrogging, so we end up leapfrogging basic infrastructure, but next gen infrastructure is really important. Part of it has been the digital public infrastructure, as we say DPI, right? I've been part of GPay and UPI before, so UPI is a very big part of it. ONDC, if you talk about account aggregator, Aadhaar, all of these are DPIs. And my hope is that in future, we will do more with artificial intelligence, with health, already some things are happening. So you'll see a lot of that happen. That's number one. Number two, we should think about platforms as well as products. So not just products, but platforms as well. So what do I mean by platforms? If you look at Android, right? Android is a platform. Now that platform came out and that created tremendous amount of innovation around it. Lots and lots of applications came up, lots and lots of businesses came up around that, and everybody's got a mobile phone in their hands, right? So that's what we need to do more of. And the third one, which is close to my heart because I've been in fintech, but I'm saying not just because I'm in fintech, but because it is important, is democratizing capital.
Fantastic. But, Ambarish, we are also sitting in the midst of rising protectionism. There are tariff wars, there's macroeconomic volatility as well, what all that's happening around the world right now. Tell me, how are Indian markets responding to it? And also, how should businesses then brace themselves, for uncertain times?
Macroeconomy is always a challenge for any country, even if you're doing really well. It is really important to understand that macroeconomic headwinds will have an impact. But I like to say that if you only have a sail, then headwinds will have an impact. But if you also have a propeller, then you can beat those headwinds. And the good news about India is that we have a few things that are propelling us forward in this kind of a headwind environment and market. So I'll give you an example, and some of these things you would have heard. For example, we have a huge demographic dividend. By what I mean by that is that we have a young population that is both productive, creating a lot of production, but also consuming. So if you look at, let's say, the average age in Japan, what is it? It's almost 50 years. It's unbelievable, but it is 50 years. Average age in US and China, They're both almost close. China is actually about 40, US is maybe about 39, right? What is the average age in India? It's 29, 30, somewhere there, right? Now this average age isn't going to change. It doesn't change every year saying next year is going to be 31. So for a long time, our average age is going to be lower than the rest of the world, which means we have a population that is productive, creating more production, so therefore our GDP is growing at a faster rate. So that is there. But at the same time, they're actually consuming. They are also consumers. When you have a young population, they are also consuming, right? So if you look at our, private final consumption expenditure, right, PFC, which is a metric that people use, which grew last year 7.2%, which is higher than the GDP, right? So we've got producers and consumers. So that's a very big propeller for us. Second thing that is happening is that we've got local innovation. And there is local innovation which is supported by the regulators and the government. So there is this whole talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat and supporting production in India and all of that. And that is actually helping create local innovation as well as local growth. And what I've seen, and I like to talk about this a lot because I'm very proud of it, is that India, because of all that, ends up leapfrogging a few things. So I'll give you an example. Like what do I mean by leapfrogging? If you look, when I was growing up in a very small town called Aligarh, I didn't have a phone growing up for the first 20 years of my life, right? What did we do? We used to go to the PCO in the evening when the STD rates were low, right? And then we'd make a phone call. From there, now everybody has smartphones. I don't think anybody got desk phones in India. Very few people got desk phones in India. Same way, if you look at internet, it went from internet cafes to everybody has phone in their hand with internet, right? Similarly, what happened with retail, right? Mom and pop retail to now we also have e-commerce to quick commerce.
Yeah.
Cash to UPI, which is again close to my heart. But we went from cash to UPI and everybody's looking at these and saying, look, amazing innovation. Even in infrastructure. If you look at airports that are built now, I don't know if you've been to the Bangalore Terminal 2, this is world class, one of the world's best airports you would ever visit. And the world is looking at us and saying, phenomenal what we are doing, and this is actually creating great growth for us as well. Right? So that is the propeller. But also, those of you who are listening and are into sailing, even with headwinds, you can actually sail against the headwind, with a technique called tacking, right? Now, so you can tack against it. And some of this, what India is doing is what you're seeing in terms of the regional treaties we are doing, whether it's UAE, Australia. Recently, we did a trade, FTA with UK. So all of that is coming together and creating a great environment where markets as well as the country can move forward, propel forward. You talked about businesses and what should businesses do. I'm a big fan of fundamentals. So you'll see that over and over again is that you can look at a lot of shiny objects, but if you focus on the fundamentals, the right things happen. And the fundamentals are simple, right? Focus on innovation, see what innovation you bring to the table. Focus on efficiencies. One of my friends like to say that there isn't a word for efficiency in Indian languages, but focus on efficiency and resilience, so that you are protected against these headwinds. But I feel there isn't a lot of magic. It's about keeping things simple, focusing on the fundamentals.
Fantastic. Ambarish, tell me, what are some of the emerging trends that are you seeing among Indians in terms of how they are investing in or managing their wealth?
India is very interesting in sort of investing because you're talking about overall investing, not just in markets, right? So if you look at where the retail wealth is going today, about 51% of all retail wealth today is in real estate. 15% of it is in gold. About 15% is in deposits. And then you've got some retirement accounts, all that. In equities, you have less than 5%. So there is a very secular shift towards equities that you're going to see and you're seeing. Now that number, just for comparison, that number in the US is, I think, about 44%. Right? So there's a large headroom. Again, I think we're going to chart a different territory altogether. But there's a long headroom for where this will go. But there is a very clear shift towards investing. Now, within that, there is a shift towards younger people coming into the market and investing. Now, if you look at last year or so in India, 65 to 70% of new demat accounts that have been opened by people who are less than 35 years of age. This is all of India, 65 to 70% less than 35 years of age for demat accounts. Now, if you look at just Angel One data, looking at us, 40%, more than 40% of our account are opened by people who are less than 25 years of age. So there's a huge shift towards young people investing, coming into the market, which is actually great because they'll build wealth over a period of time. There is also a big trend over geographies. So it is not just a tier 1 phenomena that people are investing in markets. It is tier 2, tier 3, going beyond.
It's time for a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13 in conversation with Ambarish Kenghe, Group CEO, Angel One. Digital brokers are also dominating this landscape, with Angel One, of course, being one of the leading players. Tell me, what are some of the driving factors behind this consolidation, and how do you differentiate yourself in this competitive market?
Look, while there is consolidation, I think there is some consolidation happening. I think there is a lot of competition in the market, right? If you see, and there's a ton of headroom. Let's talk about the headroom, right? India is a country of 1.4 billion people, maybe PAN accounts less than 800 million, maybe 780, 790 million, wherever I think we place that. But if you look at the number of unique demat accounts, that is less than 150 million.
Okay.
So huge headroom, maybe 900 million people or so bank accounts are there. So huge headroom in terms of where this can go. And there is a tremendous amount of competition because you see lots of brokers there. And at the same time, if you look at broader fintech, I think the stats was we have more than 3,000 fintechs in India, which are well recognized and all that. So a ton of competition. But we are also, a company that has been around and has seen many, many cycles. So we have been differentiating ourselves and will continue to differentiate ourselves. The top thing that differentiates us is that we have the experience. We, as Angel One, have the capital market knowledge from 30 years back to now. And at the same time, we've got the new know-how. I'm actually new to Angel One now, and a few months old here. But we have that know-how, we have the tech know-how as well at the same time.
Fantastic. Ambarish, I have to talk to you about your experience at Google. You were leading the Google Pay team in India and the APAC region. Now, Google Pay has become a very significant part of India's fintech infrastructure. I'm curious to know, what were your initial thoughts, when you were, building this initiative, and some of the challenges perhaps you can talk to us about while scaling it, especially in such a complex market like India.
Yeah, Google Pay, I think, has been a dream story. And I'd say, look, I've had lots of thoughts, but there's a large team that worked with me, that worked together to make this happen. So it's very important. So kudos to them for doing what they have done. And I'm very, very proud of the team as well as the product that we have. Of course, there are lots of challenges that we've faced along the way. And I'll touch on a few, but there is what happens is that every day you put one step in front of the other in the right direction. Yeah. So there are lots of problems you're solving every day, but I'll touch on a few. The topmost thing, see, it's very hard to realize this now, but if you go about, in fact, UPI is less than 10 years old. Right? And if you go back, let's say 2016, 2017 is when Google Pay launched. I think trust was the biggest factor. Right now, it's very hard to imagine, but back in the day, when somebody said you will connect your bank account to a third party, and you will allow them to transfer your money to somebody else and trust them. That trust was very important. Of course, the Google brand helped with that, but also what we did every day, the kind of customer support we provided, education we provided, all of that was extremely critical to creating that trust. And in fintech, generally, trust matters. So that's a very, very important factor. Number two is about keeping things simple. Right now, everybody feels, hey, isn't it very simple? What is AK talking about? Why is it not simple? You don't realize when you onboarded onto UPI for the first time, you had to enter a debit card number, then you had to enter an expiry date. You had a SMS go out, a SMS come in, select a bank account. So a ton of things happen. And you were not even familiar with the whole infrastructure. But making that onboarding simple, making that transaction simple was very, very important. In fact, back in the day, and even perhaps now that happens, is that a lot of time many customer support calls where people would make a transaction, it would succeed, and they'll call us and say, hey, did it go through? Was it all I had to do? Because I just entered a phone number and entered a PIN and it went through. Now with UPI Lite, it's become even crazier where you don't have to enter a PIN. So, but that simplicity went a long way in creating that. Number 3 was, how do you create growth? And we created scratch cards. We were talking about gamification and the whole idea is to bring people are not going to get rich by scratch cards, right? But you bring people into the fold, make it interesting for them, so they understand the value, and then they start using it. And last again, but not the least, actually quite important in any product, is scale. When you start scaling, you get a very different kind of problems. I always tell people that doing a school project is very, very simple. You just sort of can do it in a night. But when you want to productize it, it takes months. And when you want to scale it, it takes years. So when we are scaling, we had to work with the whole ecosystem, the banks, NPCI, regulators, everybody together. In fact, a lot of time, what I call as competition as well, to make sure that the ecosystem can scale and everybody can come together and scale to that point. Because one UPI transaction can have up to 7 legs. Right, crazy. Now all of those legs have to work for that transaction to go through. Absolutely. And so lots and lots of learnings, lots and lots of fun, and of course lots of challenges to solve.
Right. So tell me, Ambarish, what is your long-term vision for Angel One?
Look, Angel One is very, it's a very sort of interesting company, which has lots and lots of possibilities. Right. What we want to do is we want to empower 1 billion people using the power of fintech. And I talked about initially when talking about this, I said, look, capital is really important. It takes different shapes. But we want to empower people using that power of fintech. So what does that mean, right? We want to create an intelligent financial services platform, which means it's intelligent, it has financial services across the board. And right now it's taking one of the manifestation of that is the super app that we have on Angel One. But there are tons of things that are happening underneath that iceberg, and you're going to see a ton of that happen.
Fantastic. Well, all the very best to you. But before I let you go, tell me, what are the top 3 pieces of advice would you give young businesses, entrepreneurs who are watching the show today, who want to make their mark in the fintech industry? And I ask this because fintech is now becoming crowded and also highly regulated. So what would be your advice for them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like I said, when we were talking earlier, I'm not an entrepreneur in the classic sense because I don't create startups, but I'm an intrapreneur who I feel they're very similar. We create, build things. Because you talked about regulation, let me pick on that first. I actually think while it's a regulated market, it's actually a good thing. Regulations are there to protect the consumers. And in general, compliance, not just in general, actually compliance is a non-negotiable, right? So that's an important thing because it is there to protect the consumers. This is not an industry where you're going to move fast and break things.
Sure.
Because right? That's, you're dealing with people's money, the responsibility is very high. In fact, it's an industry where you move smart and build trust. I talked about trust a little bit earlier. So that's very, very important. So it's regulation is your friend, and over a long period of time, it protects the consumer. So therefore, protects your business as well. Right? That's number 1. Number 2 is just focus on the consumer. I think if you understand the consumer really well, solve a real problem. One of the things, and people who know me will tell you this, I use that quite a bit, is that don't have shiny object syndrome. A lot of time people run after the shiny object saying, this is the trend, let me just play into it.
Right.
Understand what problem you're trying to solve. And that's really important instead of running after a shiny object or a trend. Right? Within that, again, another thing that I use a lot, but you may not have heard of, I don't know if you've heard of Faster Horses story. So this, I don't know if it's a real story or not, but it makes my point. So people say that if Henry Ford had gone out and done consumer research back in the day before he created the automobile, people would have told him that they want faster horses. And if he'd gone deeper, they would have said, I want a solution that doesn't smell, that is I don't have to clean after, I don't have to feed when it's not working, it doesn't fall sick, and so on, right? So they would have said so, and then he could have said, oh, let me actually breed horses who are more like that. But he understood the real consumer problem. and created an automobile. So go deep and understand what the real pain point is. Sometimes the consumers are telling you one thing, but they have a real pain point. That is different. So that's number 2. Number 3, and I'm coming back, like I said, I'm a big fan of focusing on fundamentals. So focus on the fundamentals. That is absolutely critical. And simplicity, speed, safety, reliability. These are some of the biggest features you will find anywhere, because it's very, very critical to get the fundamentals right. When you get that right, it just works, And I've worked in many industries where I took more time understanding the fundamentals. If you're working in e-commerce, you could create all kinds of applications, but in the end, the person wants that product for a reasonable price, in good shape, delivered in time. And that's what you need. So I think fundamentals you just can't beat. So that I'm a very big fan of. The last thing I'll say on that topic is it's very important to create a vision and have belief in it. That belief is extremely important as an entrepreneur, whatever you call, when you're building something, because you can't see the future, but if you believe in it, it actually arrives. So I'm a big believer in belief in that. And when you have the right vision and you have belief in it, then you're able to rally people with you who will, because you're not going to do all of this on your own. You're going to be able to rally people behind that vision, create that belief, and hopefully then you create a phenomenal company.
Wonderful. Well, it was lovely chatting with you, Ambarish. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me here.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.